Welcome back to Spread the Wealth. I'm Jarrett. Like and subscribe. Okay, so are employers responsible for raising wages to keep up with inflation? The answer to this question is a very nuanced and convoluted situation. There are a lot of things that have to be determined. One of the first questions we'd have to answer for this is, what is inflation? Generally, in normal conversation with regular people, inflation is known as rising prices. Prices of goods and services going up, costing more money. Who gets to decide what the inflation rate is and who does that really apply to? There are several different measures of inflation. One is the CPI, or Consumer Price Index. Another is the PCE, or Personal Consumption Expenditure. Then there's numbers like the John Williams Shadow Stats number. And then there's a number that I like to use myself that I think I came up myself. I call it the PIE, or Personal Inflation Exposure. Everybody can decide for themselves what inflation is, and they can put that number out in the public or in the media any way they can or want to. And so the ones we hear most often, of course, are the CPI and PCE. So what is CPI? The CPI is a number that the government provides to the Bureau of Labor Statistics to represent the inflation rate. They do this by calculating the increase in prices in what they call a basket of over 8,000 goods over the course of a year. They do a lot of what I consider shady and slightly dishonest things to get an inflation number that is lower than it actually is. Things like hedonic adjustments, which is basically saying that goods might be going up in price, but the goods are better now, so they're not going up in price, you're just paying for a better product. Like if you bought a TV 20 years ago and it was $200, and now you have a flat screen liquid crystal display that does Chromecast and Roku and all these things, they say, well, that's not the same TV. Yes, it went up 300% in price, but you're getting a better product. But you're forced to buy the better product, so you're forced to pay more, so that's inflation. It happens with cars, video games, all sorts of stuff. They call it hedonic adjustments. Another way is substitutions. Say you eat steak every day for dinner, and the steak went from $15 a pound up to $20 a pound. So that's what, a 33% increase in price of steak. And you say, wow, I can't eat $20 a pound steak anymore. That's too much for me. I'm gonna start eating chicken. And chicken went from $10 a pound to $15 a pound. And so what's that? That's a 50% increase. In substitutions for the CPI, they can say, well, you got your dinner protein at $15 a pound, and then you went from eating steak to chicken, but now you're still getting your protein, and it's still $15 a pound. So what's the inflation rate from $15 a pound all the way up to $15 a pound? Oh, that's zero. So there was no inflation. That's a substitution, and it's wrong and dishonest in my opinion. So another way the CPI is kind of hokey is a thing called owner equivalent rent. So what they do is ask homeowners who live in the homes, if they were to rent their homes from themselves, how much would they charge themselves? But the problem with that is that a lot of people like to think of themselves as being very generous. And they would say, I'm a pretty nice guy, I'm pretty generous, I wouldn't rip anybody off. I think I would only charge me X amount. When in reality, when they start renting their house out, it's an income for them, and they start to rely on that income, and anytime they can push up their own income, they do so. So instead of seeing what people are actually paying for rent, they ask owners, if you rented your own house from yourself, how much would you charge yourself? Which is, the number's never correct. And so it gives a falsely low number. So then the inflation rate for that portion of rent is lower than it actually is. So the Federal Reserve prefers a number known as this PCE, or Personal Consumption Expenditure. It generally shows an inflation number that is a little bit higher than the CPI, but is still pretty wildly off if you're actually keeping track of the things that you buy, the goods and services, and the price rises. Another measure of inflation that's pretty common and popular these days is derived from a guy named John Williams. He runs a website called Shadow Stats. He uses the metrics that were used pre-1980, I believe, to calculate what the inflation is today. So he removes the hedonic adjustments, he doesn't use any substitutions, and his number is up in the high teens. So I like to incorporate a number that I came up with myself called the PIE, that's the Personal Inflation Exposure, that shows every individual has a different inflation rate that they pay based on the goods and services that they buy. Some people eat a lot of meat and travel a lot and go to college and have medical expenses. And those people are paying very high inflation rates because all of those things are going up in price rapidly. And other people may have low inflation exposure because they're doing things like growing their own food, they don't eat meat, they don't have medical expenses, they don't drive much, maybe they bought a car years ago and they don't need to buy another one and they don't have payments on it, so they don't have to buy a used car. This goes up in price every year. So another thing that happens is a feedback cycle. So if you pay your employees more for wages, then you have to charge more for your products to cover that. And so then the prices in the stores go up. And then your employees, when they get off of work and they just become a consumer, they go to the store and have to pay those higher prices. So then they come back and say, I need another raise. So you give them another raise, and then you have to raise your prices to cover that. And then the employees get off work and go become consumers, higher prices, more wages, more raises and prices, more, and it's a feedback loop that goes up and up. So that's one of the reasons that we hear that once inflation is out of the bottle, it's really hard to get it back in the bottle. So you can see this in history with places like Germany during the early 1920s, 21, 23 with Weimar, Hungary with the Pago, Argentina, Venezuela, Zimbabwe. Once they start having inflation, a lot of inflation, it's extremely rare to be able to stop the inflation from happening anymore. The Federal Reserve and the government are responsible for printing money, which is responsible for rising prices. How can we ask really the employers themselves to take it upon themselves to deal with all of it when it's not their fault, really? So capitalism, it seems likely, is part of the biggest problem in my opinion. I love capitalism. I'm a capitalist. I like money. I like being able to go out and get as much money as I'm willing to work for, or think to figure out a way to produce. But capitalism comes with a lot of problems. Some of those problems are that we are able to, or encouraged to, value money higher than people. And so with that mindset where it's money above all else, profit above all else, people get stepped on, and that's the truth. And so then we get things like the CPI being falsely low, corporations not wanting to pay a living wage, and so we have like minimum wage. What's the minimum I can legally pay you and not get in trouble with the law? That's not a very happy scenario, really, when you think about it. Like, why do we have a minimum wage? Because corporations are trying to pay people so little that they can't even live. So legally, you can't pay him less than this. Okay, we'll pay him that. It's crazy. So if we want jobs, we need employers. Employers are people, they need to make money. Employees are people, they need to make money. Politicians and bankers are the ones that are causing the printing and the spending and the inflation. So it's a give and take. In the end, my personal opinion is as prices go up, employers will continue to pay higher wages, but they will also continue to raise their prices of their goods to pay for the higher wages. So it will be an endless feedback loop until the system collapses or they decide to back our currency with something tangible like gold or silver or cryptocurrency or something like that instead of just guns. As of now, I personally, without any real political experience or background, I don't know a way to fix this. But what it also seems to me that employers aren't really the ones that this should fall on, although employees need living wages. So I don't know if we vote better people in or what, but we need to find a solution. If you like this video, click like. If you want to see more videos like this, click subscribe. I want to learn finance from everybody all the time, so comment below and teach me something.